Yeah. In a one-on-one chat between journalist Glenn Greenwald and 2024 GOP presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, the political novice explained why he stands in the minority when it comes to funding the war in Ukraine among the candidates. Let's watch.
Donors. The donor class of the Republican Party fundamentally disapproves of the message that I delivered on that stage. And it's the one thing that's holding Ron DeSantis back, right? Because his campaign is run by his super PAC, which is extremely well funded, far better funding than I have in this campaign, even for all the checks I've personally written. And so that holds him back. But the rest of the field is completely, as I said in the stage, it made a lot of people mad, bought and paid for by the donor class, frankly, some of which is bipartisan. It's the same donor class that swings in the other direction at times, too. I don't think they have convictions. I think that these politicians on the stage yesterday are puppets. I'm deeply convinced of that. I mean, you interact with people, they're good people. They're fine, but they're vessels.
Right.
Listless vessels, if we may use the word, of super PACs.
Over on Fox News, a panel of voters declared Vivek the winner of last week's primary debate. Let's watch.
And really early to tell us who they liked last night. Beth, who'd you like and why? One word answer, please.
Nikki Haley, she was strong.
Okay. How about you, Sammy?
Vivek, Ukraine.
Okay. How about you, Mary Josephine?
Vivek, he was not a politician.
Okay. A lot of people are saying that. Caleb, how about you?
Vivek, because he brought the energy.
All right. And Johnny?
I'll say Vivek, 2 words. Exciting and genuine.
Ramaswamy may be conservative media's new darling, but over on liberal media, he's facing some new pushback. Here he is during a clash with CNN's Dana Bash.
But can
There's
you
a
have
different
an
view
intellectually
that I have,
honest
which says that
conversation
regardless of who you are,
when you accuse
have to be
her
able
of
to have your
being
own
a
opinion.
grand wizard
Let's
of
have
the
the debate.
KKK? Can you have that intellectually
the
honest
point is-
discussion with that kind of rhetoric?
Yes, I can, Dana, because the point I'm highlighting is that even the people who, in good spirit, we all agree that the KKK was an awful organization that is a toxic stain in our national history. So given that we can start from that point of agreement, now that allows us to say, well, who actually sounds more like that organization today? The people who are calling for more racial discrimination on the basis of skin color. So yes, I think that is an intellectually useful starting point for a provocative discussion that we need to have in this country.
The whole point is
and I
the
think that-
KKK
I think the reality,
wasn't
Dana,
just
is
about rhetoric.
We have to speak openly.
They
in this
lynched
country.
people. They murdered people. They raped people. They burned their homes.
And that was wrong.
Simply
That was
because
obviously wrong.
Wrong. Okay, so again,
that is obviously a wrong
if you want
thing
to
for
have
them
an
to have done.
intellectual
Absolutely.
discussion.
So let's start with the idea that Vivek Ramaswamy benefited the most from the debate. I have seen a lot of people colloquially, like in the ether, seem to be saying that. And I probably would have made the same assessment if asked who were the winners and losers after the debate, with a slight caveat that I think I said this on the show on Thursday, that the biggest gain, it seemed to me, from any given candidate, given the gap between what I expected of the performance and what they actually delivered, was actually Nikki Haley, not Ramaswamy. I did see a recent poll that was put out, I think, yesterday from Insider Polling that seemed to reflect that, with Haley making the biggest gains in the polls as compared to Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, there have been a number of polls. I think he has inched ahead in all of them, but he's still at around 7%. Haley, in this one poll at least, is up at 11% behind DeSantis' 18% and Trump's 45% of the voter share.
I'm looking at an Emerson poll that just came out. They have Ramaswamy at 9%, Haley at 7%.
And up from, she was idling around 2%, maybe percent?
Yeah,
before the debate?
it's interesting. People certainly seem to have the most positive reaction to Ramaswamy and Haley, even though what they were saying was completely opposite, which goes to show you that it's more of just policies, but it's about responding well to a candidate's mannerisms.
Right, but there's
and
also multiple policies, and there's going to be people that maybe agree with Vivek on Ukraine, but agree with Nikki Haley on abortion.
Right.
Those are both big issues.
No, for sure. Actually, looking at the polling, it seems that DeSantis had a better night than any of us had predicted.
Yes.
Somehow because he didn't get called out a lot and he didn't attack others very much, but something about his performance seemed to resonate actually better than he has in the past, giving a little bit of hope maybe to Team DeSantis. So obviously Vivek was talking to Glenn, someone we're both acquainted with, who we talk about positively on the show a lot. I am still struck, and I know I said this in the reaction last week, but how the things what Vivek is saying about Ukraine in particular is so discordant with the rest of the candidates. Now, DeSantis is a little bit on that too, but I think he's been accused of being insincere on it. So discordant from the other candidates, but so obviously what the actual base wants, that it's amazing to me, and that's probably a lot of what they talked about in their conversation. The donor thing is interesting. That sounded more like a you criticism, frankly.
Well, I think that Vivek is absolutely right about the influence of money in politics. The problem is he's able to make those kinds of claims because he's basically entirely self-funded. His net worth is just shy of $1 billion. He's got a lot of money to burn, and he has substantially funded his own campaign. Now, on one hand, that means he's technically could be politically free from some of the influences of dark money in politics, but it also means that there isn't necessarily a real grassroots movement of people who are willing to give him money and support him. Now, it's still early days, and he's a relatively new name on the national stage, but there is some question about whether or not this is a fig leaf. Is this someone who's being propped up by the media in the same way that Pete Buttigieg was propped up by the media, or even a better example is Elizabeth Warren, who the media loved, but can never really get the grassroots dollars behind her campaign that were, I think, better evidence that there were real people who were willing to go out and vote.
His media strategy is more similar in my mind to, frankly, to RFK Jr. In doing the podcasts or being willing to go on everybody's show. He's been on Rising in the past. Maybe we'll have him on again. Talk to primarily through online media. Although he's also, he says yes to all media, right? He says yes to. He's been on Fox. He's been on CNN. Yeah, maybe like that. Although Pete wasn't on Joe Rogan, obviously, on places like that. No, but maybe he's on the progressive equivalent.
He was given a lot of kudos for going on Fox frequently, where other people wouldn't. And it was a little bit of a different media atmosphere where I think in 2020 those podcasts and things were definitely on the rise.
For sure.
Bernie going on Joe Rogan was a big moment, but I think it was also kind of a turning point where people really realized the value of that alternative media in a way that they just didn't. It's a little apples to oranges comparison, I think.
For sure. Vivek's definitely having a moment, and it will be interesting to see if that. It could obviously just be a moment. A lot of people were exposed to this person for the first time.
Yeah.
High degree of interest in him. He got a lot of screen time. He was very interesting. He said a lot of interesting things. He was the most searched for candidate, the most talked about clearly on social media. Maybe, and that could be it. Or we'll see if he builds this into something. I think that would be interesting to see.
The other point I would just make is that you raised the idea of can people be trusted with respect to Ron DeSantis on Ukraine, feeling like he is opportunistically hopping on that issue because he sees the polls. And is he going to stick to his guns once he's in office? Because I will give Donald Trump credit for not instigating any new wars, et cetera, but there were also things that he didn't withdraw from Afghanistan. Joe Biden did.
Right.
There was a bit of a mixed record on some of that stuff.
He put the plan in motion to do it.
So fair enough. I don't mean to take anything away from him, but I think it's a legitimate question when someone has a very short political timeline, whether or not they are being opportunistic or they have real bona fides behind them. I do think his attitude about certain other foreign policy endeavors, for example, his comments on China, suggest that there might not be a generalized principle of de-escalation and not confronting other military powers. I know people are reading what he said about China and Taiwan in different ways. That's part of the problem. It's hard to know until he's in office. And that also reminds me of Barack Obama, who, because he had very little record when he came into the public sphere, was able to make all kinds of representations about who he was and what he would do that ended up not coming into fruition. So that's just a warning flag.
Yeah. There was some additional reporting on his political history, because a lot was made on him not voting and not previously having voted before the 2020 election. Actually, there's a follow up on that. He said he voted for the Libertarian Party in 2004. That would be the Bush-Kerry election, and then sat out the next several elections, even 2016, according to Reuters, before becoming a hardcore Trump person in 2020.
Which is interesting in and of itself, right? Because again, we were the exact same age, we were in the exact same class. I did not vote in that election, mostly because I was a mess freshman who didn't know how to get her absentee ballot in order. And I was sitting in a cappella auditions watching the results come in and going, oh no, I should have voted.
I was not eligible to vote in 2004.
I know, sweet summer child. But I do remember the political climate, right? The mobilizing issue then was being anti-war.
Yes.
And there were, to the extent that there was a kind of bipartisan anti-war critique that was happening, even the the gentleman Oliver Anthony of the Richmond, North of Richmond song, has explained in videos how his politics were really motivated to be anti-war because of the movement that was happening at that time, around 2003, 2004. So it is interesting that Vivek Ramaswamy did vote in that election, but didn't, and the real libertarian vote is reflective of potentially
of the anti-war,
that, exactly,
for sure.
potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't vote till, well, I don't think I voted in the general election in 2008, but I voted in the Republican primary for Ron Paul, who is the most, by far, outspokenly anti-war candidate.
Now, the Dana Bash interview made a lot of news on Twitter over the weekend, so we should touch on that, if only briefly. What do you make of her line of questioning, which tried to get at the bottom of this? Is it honest? Is it intellectually honest? Is it fair to compare someone like Ayanna Pressley to the KKK, saying that her statements would make the KKK proud, modern grand wizards, quote, proud? And when that seems to, in Dana Bash's argument, ignore what the KKK was actually about, which was racial terrorism, killing black people and Jewish people. Substantively, I could say, just like we were saying in an earlier segment, if Putin says the sky is blue and I say the sky is blue, do I sound like Putin? Is the idea of acknowledging race morally equivalent with a group that had the agenda of actually killing people because they believe them to be intellectually, morally, cognitively inferior, all of those kinds of things?
Probably guess what I'm going to say. No, you don't need to make that
So why do you
comparison.
think
But I don't know
he's doing
specifically
that?
what. I also don't know specifically what comment or statement by Ayanna Pressley is being referenced.
I can tell you. She said, we don't need any more black faces that don't want to be a black voice. So she was talking about conservative people of color who don't toe the line, as it were, and who support
I think you
candidates.
can criticize that without making unfair or exaggerated comparisons. But
Yeah, I agree. I
such
wouldn't
is
agree
the
with her
currency of
underlying
politics.
statement. I think that it's not helpful what she said. But I do have some questions about whether or not, why does Vivek Ramaswamy, who's a smart guy and should be able to just say, oh, that wasn't, I should have said that differently, I should have put that differently. He keeps ending up in these like 7-minute colloquies about one narrow issue on the internet, on the media, because he won't just acknowledge that he's been using histrionic,
He's a
hyperbolic
debate club
language
guy.
in the past.
He's a debate club guy, and he's class president energy. That's what I said on News Nation the other day.
I think Jamel Bowie called it model UN energy, which feels right to me as well.
All right, more Rising right after this.